À, phân bón hớn hả? Tất cả mấy dụng cụ mà cô làm cho con là dùng riêng cho từng thách nha.
Dạ.
Mình dùng một lần mình bỏ nên con yên tâm nha. Mụn nam nhiều lắm nè chị.
Bên ở nhà mẹ banh ra thấy mụn ẩn quá trời.
Dạ. Cô làm cho con á, con cảm thấy chỗ nào không thoải mái con nói cô biết nha. Cô đổi chỗ khác hoặc là cô cho con nghỉ một xíu. Mụn nhiều lắm nè. Cố gắng chịu khó để lấy cho nó hết. Con đi lấy mụn lần nào chưa?
Dạ rồi.
Hả?
Dạ rồi.
Vậy hả?
Đi gần nhà.
À, đi lần mụn gần nhà hả? Phân bón hớn quận 12 hả chị?
Dạ, ngay chỗ Trường Chinh đó, gần Trường Chinh đó.
Dạ.
Cầu Tâm Lương Trường Chinh đó.
Dạ. Vậy qua đây cũng đâu có xa lắm đâu.
Dạ, thì đâu có xa mấy, tại mình đi chưa biết đường thì mình phải bò.
Dạ. Đi lần là biết. Ừ. Nay được nghỉ học hả Nam?
Dạ.
Nghỉ học. Năm nay là con học lớp 9 đúng không?
Lớp 8.
À, lớp 8 à? Quá trời mụn luôn nè. Phải lấy hết này ra thôi móc nó rỗ con hiểu không? Không biết nó sẹo rỗ không? Mặt mình mà có sẹo rỗ là xấu lắm. Chị được mấy bé hả chị?
2 bé, nó lớn còn nhỏ học lớp 3.
À. Rồi con đi qua đây nhé. Nằm yên nhà đừng nhúc nhích nha. Miên con đừng có lắc chân nha. Nhìn sát đây con. Ủa cô nó về chưa ha Hiền? Miên nha con. Miên cho cô nhé. Con học ở đâu ha?
Trường Nguyễn Thủ.
Trong lớp con có nhiều bạn bị mụn không?
Dạ đầy nhóc luôn.
Nhóc luôn à? Cô đợi chỗ khác nha. Cô đợi chỗ khác nha. Nghỉ xíu à, cô cho nghỉ xíu à. Ok.
Here is your story with punctuation added, just punctuate it. In 1887, the Appalachian wilderness was a place of rugged living and steadfast resilience. The Hopper family lived on the edge of this vast forest, their modest cabin nestled in a clearing, surrounded by towering trees and rolling hills painted in shades of crimson and gold. The wilderness was both a sanctuary and a silent threat, a place of beauty that demanded respect. Silas Harper, a man of few words and quiet strength, had built their home with his hands and grounded their lives in faith. His wife, Martha, was his equal in resilience, her steady devotion to God carrying them through every hardship. Together, they raised 3 children, Ezra, their eldest, growing into a man of responsibility, Nora, the practical middle child, and Robin, their youngest, a curious and free-spirited girl who often wandered beyond their watchful eyes. That autumn morning, Robin had wandered to the creek as usual, her laughter echoing through the woods. She loved the crunch of leaves beneath her feet and the chatter of birds overhead. But by late afternoon, as the light began to fade, Martha's unease grew. Robin wasn't home, she'll come back soon, Silas reassured her, though the knot of worry in his chest told him otherwise. As the hours passed and the shadows deepened, their unease turned to fear. Before Silas and Ezra set out into the forest, the family gathered near the fire. Martha clasped her hands, her voice firm but trembling as she prayed, "Lord, guide their steps and protect Robin wherever she is. Bring her home to us safely. We place her in your hands." Lanterns in hand, Silas and Ezra stepped into the dark forest. The towering trees loomed overhead, and the sound of their boots crunching against leaves was swallowed by the vast silence. Somewhere in that wilderness, Robin was alone, and the night was closing in fast. The forest felt alive in the darkness, the wind tugging at the trees as the rain came down harder. Silas and Ezra pressed on, their lanterns throwing flickering light over the muddy ground. Robin's faint footprints led them along the creek, but the rain was erasing her trail with every passing minute. "She must have come this way," Silas said, crouching to inspect the ground. His sharp eyes caught the faint imprint of a small boot in the mud, but the edges were already blurring. "Ezra, keep close. This rain's making it worse." Ezra moved carefully behind him, his boots squelching in the mud. "Pa, do you think she's scared?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Silas paused, gripping his lantern tightly. "She's strong," he said, more to reassure himself than Ezra. "But we need to hurry." The rain fell steadily, turning the forest floor into a slick, muddy mess. Silas and Ezra trudged on, their boots squelching with every step. The faint trail they followed was already washing away, but a hunch led Silas deeper into the woods, toward the tailor's cabin. When the weathered cabin came into view, it looked as uninviting as ever, hunched in the dark against the stormy sky. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney while the porch was littered with broken tools and animal hides. Jed Taylor sat on the porch, a hunting knife in hand, lazily carving a piece of wood. His brother, Hank, lingered behind him, shifting uncomfortably as the rain dripped from his hat. "Well now," Jed drawled, glancing up with a smirk. "Didn't think you'd come all the way out here in this mess." Silas stepped closer, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. His voice was steady. "Robin's missing. We tracked her this way." Jed tilted his head, the knife still in his hand. "That so?" Ezra's fists clenched at his sides. "If you saw her, why didn't you help?" Jed chuckled, the sound low and unpleasant. "Didn't seem like our business. Kids got to learn their way around the woods sometime, don't they?" Silas's voice hardened, though it never rose. "You left a child out here in the storm, Jed. If I find out you had anything to do with this," he stepped closer, his gaze unflinching, "if you ever come near my family again, you'll answer to me first." For the first time, Jed's smirk faded. Behind him, Hank shifted nervously. "Jed," he muttered, his voice hesitant. "Let it go." Jed's jaw tightened, but he tossed the knife onto the railing. "Get off my land, Harper." Silas stared at him for a long moment, then turned, motioning for Ezra to follow. The two disappeared into the rain as thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm had lessened, but the river was still raging. Water churned violently over jagged rocks, swollen from the endless rain. It roared like a living thing, swallowing the night's silence whole. Silas and Ezra moved carefully, their boots sinking into the drenched ground. Every breath was laced with urgency, every step driven by a single thought: find her. Then Ezra froze mid-step. "Pa!" Silas's gaze followed his son's trembling hand, and his heart clenched. Across the river, barely visible beneath the twisted roots of a fallen tree, Robin lay curled in a small, trembling ball. Her soaked dress clung to her frail frame, every muscle in her body shuddering, her breaths weak and shallow. The wind whipped at her damp curls, and when she finally turned her wide, terrified eyes toward them, Silas felt a surge of both relief and terror. She was alive, but she wasn't safe. "Robin," his voice barely reached her over the deafening crash of the river. He stepped forward, but Ezra grabbed his hand. "Pa, the river. It's too strong." Silas clenched his jaw. Ezra was right, the water was a black, writhing monster, ready to swallow anything that set foot in it. Ezra was already uncoiling the rope from his pack, his hands steady, but Silas could hear the tremor in his voice. "We'll cross the log," he said, breathless. "Tie me in." "I'll go first." Silas hesitated just for a second before giving a sharp nod. There was no time for doubt. Robin needed them. Ezra had just started inching across the slick, rain-slicked log when it happened. A low growl, Silas turned sharply, lifting the lantern high, and his stomach turned to ice. A wolf stood at the tree line, its fur soaked and matted yellow, eyes glowing in the dim light. Its ears were pricked forward, its gaze locked onto Robin. It was stalking her. The animal crept forward, muscles rippling beneath its drenched coat. It was testing the distance, waiting for the right moment. Ezra's voice wavered. "Pa!" Silas lifted his rifle, the barrel heavy and damp in his hands, but his heart pounded. The rain had soaked the powder. He only had one shot. The wolf crouched low, its haunches coiling like a spring. It was going to lunge. Silas held his breath. The gunshot tore through the storm, echoing over the river. The bullet slammed into the dirt near the wolf's paws, kicking up mud and water. The wolf yelped, its ears flattened, its body twisting in a sharp turn before it bolted into the darkness. Silas didn't lower the rifle. He listened, waited, but the forest remained still. The wolf was gone, and removed fast. Silas scrambled the last few feet to Robin's side. He dropped to his knees, his hands shaking as he reached for her. "Robin," he murmured, wrapping the rope around her waist. She stirred weakly, her fingers twitching against the mud. Ezra's breath hitched. "I've got you, Robin. You're safe." Silas tightened the rope around his arm, planting his boots firmly in the wet ground. "Hold tight," he called out. Ezra clutched Robin close, carefully stepping onto the fallen log. The wood slick beneath his boots, the river churning below them. But Ezra kept his eyes forward, focusing on each step. Halfway across, the log shifted slightly, and he gripped Robin tighter. "Almost there," he whispered to her, though his breath was shaky. Silas pulled on the rope, steadily guiding them toward solid ground. With one last step, Ezra reached the riverbank. Silas grabbed both of them, helping them onto the muddy ground. "Papa, you came." Silas knelt, his hand gently resting on her damp hair. His voice was low, thick with emotion. I promised I would. Robin clung to him, trembling. I prayed, Papa. He pulled her close. I heard you, Robin. By dawn, the rain had finally stilled. The sky softened into muted gray, streaked with the first hints of morning light. Silas carried Robin close, his arms worn but strong. Ezra walked beside him, his boots dragging in the mud, exhaustion etched into his every step. When they reached the clearing, Martha ran to meet them. Her breath caught, and she pulled Robin against her chest, her voice breaking. Oh, thank the Lord. Inside, the cabin was warm. The hearth fire crackled. Robin lay curled beneath thick quilts, her cheeks rosy again. Nora sat beside her, gently brushing out her tangled hair.